All right, guys, welcome back to the show. Welcome back to the channel. My name is Amit, and I am giving you basically my instant reaction from watching the movie Marco, the Malayalam movie that has come out to cinema here in Australia. I've just come out from watching it, and I'm going to give you my thoughts on this movie. This movie was advertised as one of the most brutal, bloody movies in Malayalam cinema for sure, and also just in general, one of the most violent movies that's come out in a while. So did it meet that? Did it meet that criteria? Did it meet that expectation? We'll stick around and find out what I thought about it. This will be a non-spoiler review, so I'm not going to go into too many details regarding the plot or the storyline or give away any details that might spoil this movie for you. If I do get into any spoilers, they'll be very light in nature, and they'll probably be more my opinion or how I felt in that kind of way. But yeah, this movie was really fascinating. It came out basically during the Christmas time, which I think is a very interesting time to put out a movie that's so not family friendly. From the Malayalam film industry, which is, you know, if there's any state in India that I think probably, I guess celebrates Christmas more than others, it would be Kerala. So I'm surprised that they put out a movie like this, which is so unfamily friendly. It's just not a family friendly movie. It's a lot of action, a lot of violence. And yeah, my main question coming into this movie was, is it going to meet the expectations that we had seen in the trailers, the teasers, some of the poster work? Like, we had seen blood everywhere, violence everywhere. A lot of talk about this being one of the most violent movies ever. And it is something, if you are saying the most violent movie ever, there's a lot of really violent movies, but this one to me is right up there as well in the conversation. So let me get into what I liked about this movie to begin with. Or let me first, before that, get into the background a little bit. So let me talk about some of the details about this movie. Marco 2024 Malayalam film movie came out December 20th, starring Unni Mukundan. Now, I'm a little bit familiar with Unni Mukundan. Guys, if you're new to the channel, then I am someone that covers Malayalam cinema exclusively. I love Malayalam cinema. Been following it for a few years now. 2025 will be the third year I've been exclusively following Malayalam cinema. So Unni Mukundan, I'll be honest, I've seen really not too many movies of his. I know he did have a movie last year by the name of Jagadish. I never ended up watching that movie, unfortunately. Oh, sorry, that was this year. I'm talking about like 2025 already. But yeah, a movie that came out earlier this year called Jagadish. I never actually got around to watching that movie. From what I heard about that movie, it was kind of getting mixed reviews. So, that is what it is. But the movie that I had seen of his, which I quite liked, which is the polar opposite to this movie, is a movie called Malikapuram. like a religious movie, a real heart warmer, a sweet movie, a beautiful movie that you can watch with your family, your kids. Everybody will walk out of that movie smiling, feeling good, feeling nice, feeling jovial. This is the complete opposite. So, but I know that he has range. I can say that. I think Unni Mukundan is somebody that has range. That's what I got from the movie experiences, the experiences I've seen from him and the appearances he's had. I've seen him as somebody that has got quite a bit of range and can be quite emotional at times as well. But obviously he's got a big structure. He's a big boy. He's a guy that can obviously play like an action star. So I think he was the right choice for this movie in terms of somebody that can just be like an bona fide action star. He, to me, was honestly the highlight of this movie. He was exceptional. He was really good. I think he was just fantastic. And he really brought it. So this is a really good sign for him. This movie is already making a lot of money already. Getting into the background a little bit more, I think as of today, I'm just looking at Wikipedia at the moment, this movie has made 70 crore in 5 days. And it's on a budget of 30 crore. So it's already made double the money of the budget so far in 5 days. Is pretty ridiculous. And to make 70 crore that's quite a bit of money, guys. Like, that's like, we recently did a video where we talked about Malayalam movies and basically wrapping up the year. I think I did it a little bit early because Marco's come out now, and also Rifle Club is coming out next week, which I'm going to be watching as well. And I'm going to be basically dropping a review for that. So make sure to subscribe and like and comment, all that good stuff, to make sure you follow this channel. But 70 crore, it already is in the top 10 of 2024 now in 5 days. So looking at the statistics I have here in front of me, the top 10 from the Malayalam film industry, at number 10 comes 70 crore, and that was for the movie Turbo. So, Kishkinda Kanda made 75.25 crore. I'm expecting Marco to probably beat out some of these movies, which is pretty exceptional considering the other thing about this movie is it's an A-rated movie. So I had not even heard about this concept, but it is the highest grossing A-rated Malayalam film. So that is kind of ridiculous. Like A-rated to me looks like it's an R18 plus movie. So it's something that you have to be 18 or over to watch this movie. And that makes complete sense. I can't imagine anybody bringing their kids to watch this movie, to be honest. Yeah, I would actually highly advise against that, considering some of the scenes, especially around kids in this movie. So yeah, that's some of the background. I'm not too familiar with the director. It seems like he's a new director. He's not a new director, sorry. He's done quite a few movies. His name is Haneef Adeni. He's done movies called The Great Father. Michael looks like he's done a few action movies. Looks like he's got a bit of variety under his belt. I haven't seen any of the movies he's done, so this is a new director for me. But yeah, he seems he's already sort of won me over. To sort of what he can do as a director. So that's kind of the background. I can sort of talk about a little bit of what I liked about this movie and what I didn't like about this movie. What I liked about this movie, I can start off with, is sort of how this movie is put together technically. The cinematography, exceptional. The sound design, exceptional. The sound design I'm very interested in, because as soon as I sat down in this movie in the theater, within about 15 minutes, I could tell something. And that was, this movie sounds very similar to a lot of big blockbuster South Indian movies, especially around the world of KGF. Now, I've not even seen those movies, to be honest. I've not seen KGF. I've not seen, what's the other movie that came out last year with Prithvi Raj? Salah. So those kind of movies, I had not seen those movies. But I'm familiar with those movies and sort of how they look and sort of how they sound as well. And it's interesting because I've looked into this a little bit more. The person that did the sound for this movie, his name is Ravi Basur. So he's the original music composer for this movie. So I'm sure he was involved with the background score and some of the music as well. There are a couple songs in this movie as well, which I don't know how I feel about that, to be honest. In a movie like this, probably didn't need so many songs. But talking about Ravi Basur, the sort of the sound design guy and the guy behind the OST, he did the soundtracks for KGF, KGF2, and Salah. So there you go. So, this sounds similar to that. And yeah, I guess my feeling was right about that. So again, the sound design was great. The way this was shot was fantastic. It's very gritty. It's very grim. There's not really much levity. I think there's only one or two scenes that show some levity. And the other thing I really liked about this movie that worked really well was how it just gets into it. The movie is around, I think it's about 145 minutes all up, so 2 hours and a bit. Not a super long movie, but overall, you just get into this movie. There's no wasting time. It basically starts off. You start off in basically a street fight somewhere, and then that doesn't have too much to do with the plot. But then our story basically starts. You really get into it. It's really fast paced, I would say. There's not really much time where you feel like you're too bogged down, although there are moments where I feel could have been done a little bit better. But I'll get into that when I talk about the negatives. On the positive side, once again, guys, I talked about Unni Mukundan. He was fantastic. He was really great. I just thought he brought everything. And this movie was really on his shoulders, his broad shoulders. He really brought it. And the performances was fantastic, mostly the action sequences. And while I liked his performances, I also think he really fit this movie in terms of just his look. He really looked like he played the role really well. He had the slick back hair. Obviously, he's got the build for this movie. He looked like he had worked out as well. So perfect kind of, casting for this. And on top of that, you had some really good performances from some other actors as well, I feel. It was cool to see some veteran actors in this movie. Siddique was in this movie. Jagadish was in this movie. Two characters that I felt played really, really important roles in this movie, especially Jagadish. I thought he was probably my second favorite performance outside of Unni Mukundan. He really played kind of the villain in this movie. He's having a good time, it seems like. And yeah, he was probably my favorite outside of Unni Mukundan. So some great performances, some great cinematography. The fight sequences in this movie were pretty special. I was trying to think back because I remember when I started covering Malayalam cinema, what I really wanted to do was see what action movies from the Malayalam film industry look like. Last year we had a pretty good example of one. We had a movie called RDX that came out, which was really fantastic in terms of its stunt choreography, and some of the sequences in that movie were really special. This movie was basically, I guess, the action movie of the year, if you want to call it like that. I can't remember too many other movies that have had action at this level. We had the movie Turbo, from Mammootty, which had some pretty epic action sequences as well. I really enjoyed those sequences. But I think this movie just takes the cake in terms of being an action movie. This one was really good. There was multiple scenes that were really good. I think my favorite was basically the one where they were fighting in like a forest. Essentially, they'd kidnapped Unni Mukundan to go somewhere, and without giving out too much details, there's a fight sequence in the forest, which reminds me a lot of the opening sequence to Deadpool. If you guys have seen that movie, Deadpool vs Wolverine, so Deadpool and Wolverine, minus the sort of comedy parts and the dancing. It was just a whole lot of blood and a whole lot of action in that scene. So yeah, and there's one scene I have to mention. I have to mention the scene because this scene was absolutely epic. There's a scene where Unni Mukundan, his character Marco, is essentially on a staircase, and they're going up a trail of stairs, and that scene is shot so well. It's reminiscent to me of some of the great action sequences from movies like The Raid. If you guys have seen that movie, one of the best martial art movies in history, hands down. It reminds me of a sequence in Oldboy, the Korean movie. We all know about the elevator scene. If you love your action movies, it reminds me a little bit of that as well, just because the close quarters and the way it was shot was fantastic. And there was a really epic sequence in the show Daredevil, which has really become iconic, which is I think it's a staircase or a corridor, really close quarters. But they shot this scene so well, and to me, that was probably the highlight of the movie. To be honest, those fight sequences, especially the one I'm talking about, if you guys have seen it, let me know what you thought about that scene in the comment section and what else you thought about the action sequences in this. They were freaking brilliant. Definitely the highlight of the movie. Now, I will say that, while I enjoyed a lot of that aspect of this movie, the negatives of this movie were probably some with scripting. I feel like this movie tried to do a lot at times. Like there was a lot of different sort of storylines that they tried to cover, and some worked better than others. Now, look, it's not too bad. I'm not going to say this movie has a terrible storyline or the script is like horrible. I think that it is good enough to keep you engaged throughout the movie, but there is a part in this movie which I felt was the weakest, was probably the investigative part, because I just was not invested in that. And that might have been a little bit to do with me knowing what this movie is about and knowing what's coming up later. So I'm just waiting for that to start, if that makes sense. Like I know what's going to come to me, and it's going to come at some time, and this part is just me waiting to get there. So maybe that's got a bit to do with it, just the expectation. But if there was anything in this movie that I felt dragged or let me down a little bit, it was probably, just that. There's a middle period after the sort of fast-paced start where we sort of bob down a little bit and we have to wait for it to accelerate a little bit more until we get there. So that was probably one of the biggest negatives. Some of the storylines, there's a romance angle, which I feel like I don't even know why they even did it, to be honest, because it's not even introduced to us until I was surprised that they even introduced it to us, because it was almost near the intermission where they mentioned something along those lines. And I was like, oh, wow. I was pretty surprised at that. So that was something that I think just, again, there was a whole lot of different things happening. There was, I said, the romance angle, but there was also this feud or this rivalry between these brothers, essentially. Marco is placed in the family because he's like an adopted son in some ways. So there's a lot of different stories going on. I honestly feel like if this movie was, to just cut off, honestly, 45 minutes of this movie and just make it like a quick trim, maybe 1 hour, 45 minutes. Maybe like a, 1 hour 30 kind of minutes, like a 90-minute movie, or maybe like a 110 kind of movie, cut off about half an hour. This movie could have been really quick and precise and got us to where we wanted to quicker, because that's really what we want to see. Like that's what we've been advertised, and they definitely deliver on that. Like in terms of this movie being just bloody and violent, yeah, it is a violent movie. It is one of the most violent movies I've ever seen, to be honest. And I had seen a few people talk about this movie and comparing it to KGF because of the sound. In fact, I will read you guys from the Wikipedia article that I saw. This is from Sanjit Siddhartharan of OTT Play, who gave this movie 3.5 stars and wrote, Marco is the closest Malayalam film to a Prashant Neel film, not in terms of scale of story, but style. So Prashant Neel films are the KGF films, as I mentioned before, and that's why I was like, yeah, the music is right there, and they even have somebody doing the music from KGF. So that was there. But style, Unni Mukundan's performance gets the lion's share of the credit for this too. I agree with that completely. Marco caters to fans of stylized action and intense violence. So it definitely meets that. Now for me, it doesn't really remind me that much. It does remind me of a Prashant Neel film in the KGF series. But what this reminds me more of is actually, I have covered a few movies from a director by the name of Arun Matheswaran. I covered it on my friend's friend of the show, Kathy from Cinemondo. We have covered some Tamil movies on that channel. She covers all kinds of movies, but with her, I covered a few movies from the director Arun Matheswaran, who had done a movie called Rocky, which was advertised as one of the most violent movies. I honestly think that movie might be a little bit more violent than this movie that I'm talking about right now in Marco. And Arun Matheswaran also did a movie called Sani Kayed Hum, which was also super violent. So I feel like this movie fits into that world a little bit better. Those movies also I felt lacked in story a little bit, but they definitely didn't lack in the violence at all. And this sort of movie I feel reminds me more of a movie from Arun Matheswaran than anybody else. Adding in some of those elements from the KGF world in terms of his style, in terms of his music. That was definitely there. Well, that covers it for me, guys. Thanks a lot for listening. I did overall enjoy this movie. I will say it definitely beat my expectations. I went in a little bit apprehensive to this movie. I will say I did forget about one of the other sort of negatives, or one of the things that I didn't like so much about this movie was I feel the last act of this movie was a little bit lacking as well. Like, I feel the first act was good. The second act was awesome. The third act, when they sort of shoehorn a character into the last act to give us, our final conclusion to what, where we're going to, it didn't really work that well for me. Because one, we didn't really know where this was coming from. They sort of got somebody to come in and, help us get to the end. The ending of this movie kind of just makes me feel like, there's a lot of stuff happened, but there's not really... At least for me, I don't feel like this was a happy ending. I don't feel like this was a sad ending. This was just an ending. And maybe that's part of the ambiguity of this movie and what makes it great. But for me, I think I would have liked either a positive or a negative or a tragic kind of ending, which this movie sort of didn't deliver on. It also became a little bit predictable towards after the second act. Like when they introduced the third, this new shoehorn character that I'm talking about, the movie kind of for me just starts to go in like, okay, I could kind of see the end of this movie. It could end in one or two ways, and it sort of ended in one of the ways that I thought. So yeah, that was one of the other negatives. But overall, I think, look, I'm talking about this movie like a lot and speaking about some of the negatives, but overall, I did enjoy this movie. I will definitely say this is an enjoyable movie despite the action, despite the gore. The action I loved. The gore was a bit over the top for me. Definitely with sort of some of the stuff they did again in the third act more. The first and second act I think were fine. Like, yes, it was gory, it was bad, but that third act, it just takes you to some other place, man. Like, oh my goodness. Whew. Oh my goodness. It really took you to some places. But hey, if you've seen this movie, guys, please let me know in the comment section what you thought about this movie. I'd love to chat with you about this movie and see what you thought. And yeah, please make sure to like and subscribe. I'm going to do a Rifle Club review probably next week when I watch it, and going to be doing a lot more videos in 2025. We have a very exciting time coming up in 2025, guys. I can guarantee you that. But thanks again for listening, and I will talk to you on the next one.